The question isn't why did the Native Americans adopt horses, it's how did they not adopt horses. For thousands of years, the vast majority of the world's nomadic cultures were mounted on horseback, herding their animals and trading their furs for luxury goods from far-off lands. And yet somehow, the indigenous peoples of the Americas remained stubbornly on foot. The horse had been domesticated 4,000 years ago, but it took until the conquistadors arrived in the 16th century to put a saddle on a Native American's back. But why? Why did it take so long? Hi, it's me and this is my channel. Today we're exploring the idea that North America was simply too big to conquer. You know how people say there are no stupid questions? Well, there are. But since nobody has asked this question before, I'm gonna ask it anyway. How do you herd buffalo on foot, if you didn't know? Buffalo were the main meat source for most tribes east of the Rocky Mountains. They provided not just food, but hides for shelter and clothing. And though some tribes hunted them with horses, for most buffalo hunting was a communal effort, a large-scale operation requiring hundreds of people to surround and corral the beasts. Horses might have been useful, but running alongside your prey isn't exactly efficient. And when the prey is bigger than you, well, good luck. Even today, buffalo can outrun a human by a factor of 3 to 4. So, I don't think chasing them down on foot was all that common. Instead, tribes would drive buffalo over cliffs or crush them with superior numbers, killing hundreds at a time. The meat would be shared amongst the community and any extra hides would be traded to other tribes. Who needed them? Without buffalo, these tribes couldn't survive. Yet they still somehow avoided horses. Perhaps they simply didn't want the responsibility of caring for another large animal. Maybe the land simply didn't have enough vegetation to sustain both humans and horses, or maybe the tribes were really lazy. The eastern woodlands were a diverse mix of forests, swamps and grasslands. Plenty of room for a large herd of horses to roam and graze. But as we saw in our last episode, the land east of the Mississippi was mostly settled by agricultural tribes. And if you've ever lived on a farm, you know that horses aren't exactly low maintenance. They need shelter, food and water and lots of it. I mean, if you wanted to own a horse, you probably couldn't afford not to. But even then, horses still require regular maintenance. And unlike cattle, they can't really be left to fend for themselves. A horse is only as useful as its ability to run. So it is likely that these tribes simply didn't have the resources to spare on such a luxurious pet. But what about out west where there was an abundance of wild horses? The Spanish conquistadors noticed that the Native Americans out west weren't riding horses, nor had any of the local tribes domesticated any of the wild ones. There are a couple reasons for this. The first is that these horses were pretty much useless. They were small, bony and sickly, the result of interbreeding between wild mustangs and donkeys, which were brought over by earlier expeditions. This wasn't a problem, however, because the Native Americans already had horses. They were called the Konya and they looked a lot like modern zebras. These horses were sturdy, sure-footed and immune to snakebite, perfectly suited to the rugged terrain of the Southwest. They were also a lot smaller than modern horses, standing only about 3 feet tall. That might sound like a bad thing, but these horses were perfectly suited to carrying children or transporting messages. At one point, every tribe from the Pacific Northwest to the Great Plains had adopted these horses into their culture. The Lakota, Cheyenne and Apache would use them for hunting, while the Hopi and Zuni used them for racing. Though they were tough and sure-footed, they were also skittish and difficult to control. When the Spanish arrived, they quickly wiped out the smaller horses, adopting the larger ones for themselves. By the end of the 18th century, there were less than 100 full-blooded Mustangs left in North America. So why did it take the Spanish so long to notice that Native Americans already had horses? Well, it's a matter of perspective. To the Spanish, a horse was a large, powerful animal, something that could carry a rider and plow a field. To the Native Americans, a horse was just another type of deer, something that could be hunted for its meat and hide. It wasn't until the Spanish began encroaching on tribal lands that the two cultures met, and by then, it was too late. The horse had been domesticated thousands of years ago. But somehow the indigenous peoples of the Americas resisted adopting it. Perhaps they knew that a horse is only as good as its rider.